There comes a time in every life when the weight of the world feels too heavy, when the struggles pile up, the storms rage, and no matter how hard we push, how hard we fight, it feels like we're sinking. Have you ever been there? Have you ever knelt down at night staring at the ceiling, whispering, "God, I can't do this on my own"? Let me tell you something, you were never meant to do it alone. Look around at the world today. People are exhausted, anxious, carrying burdens that were never meant for their shoulders. We live in an age where everyone is told, figure it out yourself, hustle harder, push more. But let me ask you, how's that working out? Because no matter how strong we think we are, there will always come a moment when we reach our limit. And that, my friends, is the moment God has been waiting for. Think about David standing before Goliath, a shepherd boy with no armor, no experience in battle, just a sling and 5 stones. If you had been there watching that moment unfold, you would have laughed. You would have said, "David, you don't stand a chance." But David wasn't fighting in his own strength. He wasn't relying on his skill, his strategy, or his power. He put it in God's hands. And when he did, the impossible happened. Maybe you feel like David standing before your own giant. The mountain of debt, the illness that won't go away, the broken relationship, the dream that seems out of reach. And you've tried, oh, how you've tried to fix it, to fight it, to overcome it. But the more you strive, the more you sink. That's because some battles were never meant for your hand. There's a businessman who built his entire life chasing success. He worked from sunrise to midnight, sacrificed time with his family, his health, his peace, all for the dream of being somebody. And one day when he had all the money, the status, the recognition, he sat alone in a massive house and realized he was empty. Everything he had worked for had left him hollow. And in that moment, with tears running down his face, he did something he had never done before. He put it in God's hands. And do you know what happened? For the first time in his life, he felt free. Some of you here today are carrying burdens you were never meant to carry. You're trying to hold your family together, trying to fight battles that belong to God, trying to control what was never yours to control. And God is saying, let go. Trust me. Put it in my hand. What are you afraid of? That he won't come true? That his plan won't be as good as yours? My friend, his hands formed the stars. His hands carved the mountains. His hands healed the blind and raised the dead. Do you really think your life is too much for him to handle? There was a man drowning in the ocean, struggling with all his strength to stay above water. A boat came by, but instead of reaching out, he kept flailing, kept fighting, kept trying to save himself, until, exhausted, he finally let go. And at that moment, the rescuers pulled him in. God is reaching for you. But he won't fight you for control. He won't force you to trust him. You have to surrender. You have to release your grip on fear, on doubt, on pride, and say, Lord, I can't do this without you. And when you do, when you finally put everything in God's hands, you will discover something powerful. You were never drowning. You were just afraid to let go. There comes a time in every life when the weight of the world feels unbearable. When the struggles pile up, the storms rage. And no matter how hard we push, how hard we fight, it feels like we're sinking. Have you ever been there? Have you ever stared at the ceiling in the silence of the night, whispering, God, I can't do this anymore? Have you ever reached the end of your strength, feeling like there's nothing left to give? Let me tell you something, you were never meant to carry it all alone. Look at the world around you. People are exhausted, overwhelmed, drowning in worry. They push harder, run faster, chase success, control outcomes, and still peace escapes them. We are taught to hustle, to grind, to force doors open. But what happens when even your best efforts aren't enough? What happens when no amount of strategy, intelligence, or hard work can fix what's broken? That is the moment when God is waiting, arms open, saying, "Give it to me." David stood before Goliath not as a warrior, but as a shepherd. No armor, no experience, no earthly advantage. By human standards, he didn't stand a chance. But David knew something the world didn't. The battle was never his to fight. He didn't trust in his strength. He didn't rely on his skill. He put it in God's hands. And in that moment, the impossible became possible. Maybe your giant isn't a warrior on a battlefield. Maybe it's the financial struggle that keeps you awake at night. Maybe it's the diagnosis that shattered your world. Maybe it's the anxiety that never lets go. You've tried everything, planned, fought, controlled, but nothing is working. You are drained, exhausted, running on empty. And God is saying, "Let me take it." A man spent his life chasing wealth, power, success. He worked endless hours, sacrificed time with his family, neglected his health, convinced that once he made it, peace would come. But when he finally had it all, he sat in his mansion, empty, broken, lost. It was only when he surrendered everything to God that he found what he had been searching for all along. Some burdens were never meant for your hands. Some battles were never yours to fight. The moment you surrender, the moment you stop striving and start trusting, is the moment God moves. You were never drowning. You were just afraid to let go. People go through life carrying burdens they were never meant to bear. They fight battles that were never theirs to win. They wake up each morning with the weight of worry pressing down on their shoulders, convinced that if they don't hold everything together, their world will fall apart. They strive, they push, they exhaust themselves trying to control what was never meant to be in their hands. And all the while, God is standing there waiting, whispering, "Give it to me." There is peace in surrender. There is freedom in placing everything in God's hands. He formed the heavens and the earth. He carved the mountains, set the stars in the sky, and spoke life into existence. Do you really believe your problems are too much for him? Do you think he does not see your pain, your struggle, your fears? He knows, he cares, and he is waiting. Some battles were never meant for your hands. Some burdens were never yours to carry. You can keep striving, keep pushing, keep exhausting yourself, trying to control what was never yours to control. Or you can take a deep breath, open your hands, and release it all to the one who has never failed. You were never meant to drown. You were only meant to trust. A businessman spent his entire life chasing success. From the moment he woke up to the moment he fell into bed, his mind was consumed with numbers, deals, and deadlines. He told himself that once he had enough money, once he reached the top, he would finally feel at peace. So he sacrificed. He sacrificed time with his family. He sacrificed his health. He sacrificed his joy. He told himself it would all be worth it in the end. And then one day he arrived. The money was there, the recognition, the power, the status. It was all his. He had the mansion, the cars, the influence. He had everything the world told him would make him happy. But one night as he sat alone in his grand estate staring at the city lights, a deep emptiness settled over him. He had spent his entire life climbing a ladder, only to realize it was leaning against the wrong wall. He had everything he ever wanted, except peace. So he did something he had never done before. With tears streaming down his face, he fell to his knees and prayed, God, I've done it my way and I'm still empty. I put everything in your hands. And for the first time in his life, he felt free. How many of us are chasing something, believing that once we get there, everything will finally fall into place? Maybe it's success, maybe it's approval, maybe it's the dream of a perfect life, a perfect relationship, a perfect future. We tell ourselves, once I have this, then I'll be happy. But what if the peace we're looking for isn't found in what we can achieve, but in what we are willing to surrender? We try so hard to control everything. We grip our plans, our dreams, our futures so tightly, afraid that if we let go, we will lose everything. But what if true freedom comes not from holding on, but from trusting God enough to release it? God is not asking for your perfection. He's not waiting for you to have it all figured out. He is simply asking you to trust him, to stop striving, to stop chasing what will never satisfy, to stop believing the lie that you have to do it all on your own. Some burdens were never meant for your hands. The moment you surrender is the moment you step into the peace you've been searching for all along. All along. Some burdens were never meant for your hands. Some battles were never yours to fight. But how often do we refuse to see it? How often do we wake up every morning carrying the weight of worry, fear, and stress as if we were the ones holding the universe together? We live as though everything depends on us, as if our strength alone can determine our future, as if our striving can change what only God controls. And in the process, we exhaust ourselves, running in circles, never finding peace, never feeling secure, because deep down, we know the truth. We are not in control. A woman spent years trying to fix her broken family. She carried the responsibility of keeping everything together, of making sure everyone was happy, of healing wounds that she did not cause. She tried harder, prayed harder, did everything in her power to change things. But the more she tried, the worse things became. The arguments didn't stop. The pain didn't heal. And one day, sitting alone in her car, drained and defeated, she broke down in tears. She had given everything, but nothing had changed. And in that moment of surrender, she whispered, God, I can't do this anymore. I give it to you. That night, she slept for the first time in years without fear. Nothing in her situation had changed yet, but something in her had. She had finally let go. She had finally understood that she was never meant to fix it all. She had spent years fighting a battle that was never hers to win. How many of us are doing the same thing? Trying to force open doors that God has closed, trying to control people who were never ours to change, trying to carry burdens that are breaking us from the inside out. And all the while, God is waiting, calling, saying, give it to me. He is not asking us to figure everything out. He is not expecting us to have all the answers. He is simply asking us to trust, to stop striving, to stop believing that everything depends on our efforts, because it doesn't. The moment we surrender, the moment we truly place it in His hands, is the moment we find peace. We were never meant to drown in worry. We were only meant to trust the one who has never failed. There comes a point in life when you have done all you can. You've tried, you've fought, you've planned, strategized, pushed forward with everything in you, and yet nothing seems to work. The weight on your shoulders grows heavier. The burden in your heart deepens. And no matter how hard you try to hold it all together, things keep slipping through your fingers. You tell yourself, maybe if I just try harder, maybe if I just do more. But deep down, you know the truth. You are exhausted. You are worn thin, and nothing you do seems to be enough. You weren't meant to live this way. A man was trapped in the middle of the ocean, struggling to stay afloat. The waves crashed around him, pulling him under, and every time he came up for air, he fought harder, flailing his arms, desperate to save himself. A rescue boat appeared, and the rescuers shouted, "Stop fighting! Let go! Trust us!" But in his panic, he couldn't. He was convinced that if he didn't keep struggling, he would drown. So he kept fighting, kept exhausting himself, until finally he had nothing left. His strength gave out, his body went limp, and in that moment, the rescuers pulled him in. This is exactly how so many of us live. We fight to control things we were never meant to control. We stress, we worry, we overthink, believing that if we just try a little harder, things will work out. And when they don't, we panic, believing we have to fix it ourselves. But what if the very thing that is keeping us from peace is our refusal to let go? God is standing there reaching out saying, "Give it to me." He isn't waiting for you to figure it all out. He isn't expecting you to have all the answers. He is simply asking you to trust, to stop striving, to stop fighting a battle that was never meant for you. Because the truth is, you were never meant to carry this alone. Some of the greatest miracles happen in the moment of surrender. The moment when you stop fighting and say, "God, I give this to you." That is when peace rushes in. That is when fear fades. That is when you realize you were never drowning. You were only afraid to let go. God is not asking you to have it all figured out. He is not waiting for you to be strong enough, wise enough, or perfect enough. He is simply asking you to trust him. To take everything you have been holding on to, all the fear, all the stress, all the uncertainty, and put it in his hands. Because the truth is, you were never meant to carry it alone. You were never meant to fight this battle by yourself. The moment you surrender is the moment you realize you were never drowning, you were just afraid to let go. God is not asking for your perfection. He is not waiting for you to be strong enough, wise enough, or capable enough. He is simply asking you to trust him. Yet, how often do we resist? How often do we hold on tightly to our fears, our struggles, our dreams, convinced that if we don't control them, everything will fall apart? We live in a world that tells us to push harder, to fight longer, to figure everything out on our own. But no one tells us what happens when our strength runs out, when our plans crumble, when we reach the edge of our ability and realize that no matter how hard we try, we can't do it alone. A woman spent years carrying the weight of her family's problems. She was the fixer, the peacemaker, the one who held everything together. She thought that if she just worked hard enough, if she just gave more of herself, she could heal what was broken, but the more she tried, the more things unraveled. No matter how much she gave, it was never enough. One night after another fight, another disappointment, another moment of feeling like she was failing, she broke. With tears streaming down her face, she whispered, "God, I can't do this anymore. I give it to you." And in that moment, something changed. Not in her situation, at least, not right away. But something shifted inside of her. The weight that she had been carrying for so long, the burden that had drained her spirit and stolen her peace, was no longer hers to bear. For the first time she understood she was never meant to carry it alone. How many of us are doing the same thing, holding on so tightly to the very thing that is breaking us, fighting battles that were never ours to fight, trying to control outcomes that were never in our hands, and all the while God is standing there, waiting, whispering, "Let go, it to me. There is a peace that comes when you finally surrender, when you stop striving, when you stop believing the lie that you have to do it all on your own, because you don't. God never asked you to carry it by yourself. The moment you put it in his hands is the moment you realize you were never meant to drown, you were only meant to trust. There is a moment in life when you realize that no matter how strong you are, no matter how much you plan, no matter how hard you fight, some things are simply beyond your control. You can give your best, pour everything you have into a situation, and still it may not turn out the way you hoped. And when that moment comes, when you are exhausted from trying, weary from carrying burdens that are too heavy, God is there, waiting, whispering, "Give it to me." But we hesitate. We hold on tightly to our worries, as if clinging to them will somehow change the outcome. We tell ourselves that we have to be the ones to fix it, that if we don't keep pushing, everything will fall apart. We carry the weight of our past, the pressure of the present, and the fear of the future, convinced that if we let go, we will lose control. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if letting go is not losing control, but finally stepping into real peace? A man spent years chasing success, believing that once he achieved enough, he would feel secure. He worked long hours, sacrificed his health, his relationships, and even his peace of mind, all in pursuit of something that always felt just out of reach. No matter how much he gained, it was never enough. He was exhausted, but he couldn't stop until one day his body did. A health scare forced him to pause, to reflect, to face the truth that he had been running on empty. Sitting in the hospital, he finally whispered, "God, I give it to you." And in that moment, peace flooded his heart in a way that no amount of success ever had. How many of us are running the same race, striving, pushing, exhausting ourselves in pursuit of security, happiness, control, only to find that the harder we try, the emptier we feel? We were never meant to live this way. We were never meant to carry everything alone. God is not asking you to figure it all out. He is not expecting you to have all the answers. He is simply asking you to trust him, to surrender, to release the burden you were never meant to carry, because the moment you truly put it in his hands is the moment you realize you were never meant to drown. You were only meant to trust. You were never meant to carry it all alone. You were never meant to fight battles that weren't yours, to bear burdens that only God can lift, or to chase a sense of control that will never bring you peace. Life will bring struggles, disappointments, and moments where you feel like you are drowning. But the answer is not in striving harder. The answer is in surrender. True strength is not found in how much you can handle, but in knowing when to let go. True peace is not in having all the answers, but in trusting the one who does. God is not asking you to figure it out. He is simply asking you to put everything in his hands, to release the weight of worry, fear, and uncertainty, to stop fighting battles that drain you and start trusting the one who never fails. The moment you surrender is the moment peace takes over. The moment you let go is the moment you realize you were never drowning. You were only holding on too tightly to what was never meant for you to carry. Give it to God and watch how he turns your burdens into blessings, your struggles into strength, and your fears into unshakable faith.